Hey everyone, welcome back. It's time to continue the story of the crew of the USS Revelation. We've been having a lot of fun playing the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game over on Roll For It on Twitch. So at the end of the previous episode, 2 Cardassian warships warp their way across the barrier and surround the alone USS Revelation on the edge of Federation space. And after raising the Federation ship's shields, remember this thing is tiny compared to these 2 gigantic ships, Captain Avad asks them what on earth they're doing here, and just through a slight kind of loophole in the accord between the 2, I guess, warring nations, the Cardassians are actually allowed over this side of the border. So when the captain demands to know what they're doing, 2 Cardassian captains, one called Gull Icarus and the other called Gull Zul, who is very drunk apparently, just say, look, we're trying to find some terrorists. And being a stalwart Federation captain, he's not fazed by this. But he is concerned, especially as they're off to a planet that is basically inhabited by the people who have been subjugated in the past by these aliens, the Cardassians. All of the characters have to tiptoe their way around these 2 very aggressive and slightly confused captains because they thought this ship would be smaller because of how they'd previously spoofed the sensor readings to make themselves not look like they are, and in the process decreasing the size value, I guess. I don't know how it actually worked, but after a heated conversation and the drunk captain just saying, oh, we can fight them, we find out if they know where these terrorists that we're looking for are. The Klingon ship that they had previously been escorting nearby appears out of nowhere, decloaks next to the Revelation, and the Klingon captain comes onto the comms and says, is there a problem here? In a more Klingon-y voice than that. Peachy's better at it than I am. Now, even though both of the ships on our side are pretty small, this fight is starting to even up, which puts the Cardassians in a position of, do we really want to start a war over this? Especially when they won't answer our questions. The captain of VAD is not having any of it and even asks them to go back to where they came from. So as a sort of peace offering, the not drunk Gull or captain tells the other one to just go. So we see the gigantic ship, in comparison to these other 2, turn back to where it came from and unexpectedly disappears from sight. Now this is a technology that no one knew the Cardassians had, which prompts Sakon, the science and medical officer, to go, oh, better scan that, and just takes the minute opportunity while it's disappearing from sight to scan it and figure out that it's a very unusual design and something they've never seen before, especially as it now has the ability to disappear from their scanners. After Gull Icarus tries to convince Captain Avad to notify him if he sees any terrorists, or as the Federation would call them, freedom fighters, and a warning, or maybe a veiled threat, he pulls away and goes back to his own space. They thank their Klingon friends and, wiping the sweat from their brow, they turn back to their original mission, which is to deliver aid and supplies to the planet, the new Bajoran colony, which I forget the name of. When they arrive at the colony, Captain Avad is told to meet with the governor of the colony called Ugis Kir. Chief Engineer Shrath Talar receives a secret message from Section 31 to make contact with his freedom fighter called Ula. Arrangements are made to transport the aid and supplies down to the colony, and when they arrive, they're greeted by the governor, who is ecstatic and very happy to receive the help and to have the Federation captain there and the bridge crew, and decides that a banquet is in order to invite these people and thank them for their hard work. So, after a little bit of cajoling, the crew decide to attend in their best uniforms, all shiny around the collars or whatever, I guess. While Captain Abad is doing the political stuff with the governor, Mako Bay, the security officer, is kind of scouting out the vibe of the party. Parties are a natural habitat for Bay, so he slides right in super easy and manages to ask a waiter what's going on the planet. Apparently this is the first party since the colony was founded. There's hungry people here, which seems weird, especially as this extravagant banquet is quite filled with food. But it does make sense, since they were asked to deliver food supplies to the planet. The Vulcan Sakon is also chatting, trying to figure out what's going on around here, when one of the party guests mentions that they'd never seen a Vulcan with a goatee, which is strange because Sakon doesn't have a goatee, but when he checks his chin, there's one there. And eventually, through idle conversation, the same guest mentions that one of his friends had joined the Beige Order, and being fairly certain that this sounds like the freedom fighter group that Talar is supposed to get in contact with, he starts to intimidatingly impress on this guest that he should tell him exactly who his friend is and how he can meet him. Doesn't go down very well, and eventually the guest slips away, or runs away, I'm not sure which it was, but Sakon finds himself strangely thrilled by this intimidation attempt, and being a Vulcan without emotion, that's a bit odd. Back on the USS Revelation, Chief Petty Officer Margaret King, who is in control of the transporter, is confused. She looks at Sakon and says, "Well, I'm pretty sure I teleported you to the surface," and Sakon's like, "Well, maybe something went wrong." He calls the captain to check on the rest of the crew, but the captain kind of waves him off because he's starting to get somewhere with this governor. He's convinced him that maybe a private chat about the problems of the colony would be in his best interest. So he calls Bay and Talar and asks them whether the teleport went fine. They're like, "Yeah, why are you calling us? We're staring at you right now." Sakon, with the beard, asks, "What precisely is happening?" And Sakon, back on the ship, hears himself talk and is incredibly confused. At this point, Margaret King butts in and says, "If what I'm reading is correct, there's another Sakon stuck in the transporter buffer that reads the pattern and moves it to another place. Something has gone seriously wrong on this prototype ship." Bay and Talar decide it's probably best to put Sakon back together. However, King tells them to hurry because the one stuck in the computer is slowly degrading in the quality of the copy, so in 7 minutes it will cease to exist. And Sakon is fairly convinced that he wants all 3 versions put back together. As an engineer, Talar thinks through the problem and decides that it's probably best to get a teleporter on this side, which they don't currently have, to communicate with the other, which makes the entire process much easier and much safer. Unfortunately, they can't really find any in this party, so Bay runs off and looks around the kind of cargo area where he was previously unloading the stuff from the ship to the planet. And he sees some security officers around, and despite his very congenial mood and charming personality, they don't seem convinced until one of them is offered a position in the Federation, perhaps a promotion. And so very, very impressed by this kind of string-pulling offer that Bay has made, he lets him through, and Bay dashes to the cargo teleporter, and along the way mentions to Talar that he made a deal, but he doesn't exactly intend to keep it, so we might want to avoid that security officer in the future. Now, Sakon with the beard isn't exactly sure what's going on, but Talar and Bay drag him along, stuff him on this cargo teleporter, and Talar, with the help of King at the opposite end of the telephone line, begin to integrate the three patterns. Just in my mind, there was like the shimmery, like line streaking patterns, like, and the sound like the weird ringing synthy sound just for an extended period. Everything wobbles. On the screens there are 4, 7, 17, 28 Sakons. They are entirely uncertain as to what's happening as a figure starts to reappear on the teleporter on the ship with multiple heads, multiple arms. It seems to be coalescing together, and eventually Sakon is in one place. After researching the problem, Margaret King tells everyone that there was probably a mislabeled cargo container, and the multiple sending down of this same numbered thing, along with the unexpected change in mass of the ship, confused the teleporter. Little did everyone know that this was not mislabeled. It was intentionally replicated to look like one of the supply cargo things that they were sending down, where instead it actually contained weapons that Talar was supposed to give to the freedom fighters. Sakon, a little bit shaken, thinks back to the very recent events and seems to be able to recall several different versions of the same period of time. Meanwhile, down on the planet, Captain Avad is very good at convincing the governor that he wants to help, that it's important that the colony survives and his people are fed. So eventually the governor opens up that this Ula person is the leader of the freedom fighters and they've been stealing enough food to feed an army. That's the reason why people are going hungry on this colony. They've jailed one freedom fighter that might be able to give Avad some leads. So Avad decides that that's probably a good place to start at some point. However, there's still the matter of the political and formal party to continue with. So Avad gets dragged to the governor's wife's poetry reading. That lasts for several hours. Fortunately, the bridge crew bring the news of exactly what had just transpired to Captain Avad while he was in the poetry reading. Halfway through, he had to leave. It was really unfortunate, but he had to go. The poetry was lovely, though. He's very sad to have missed the rest. They then present to him their plan to infiltrate the freedom fighters and to help get back the food, which includes Bay, who is a skilled infiltrator. So Sakon decides that plastic surgery of a sort to make Bay look like a Bajoran would be a great way to gain their trust. So they perform the surgery, and as they unwrap the bandages around Mako Bay's face, that is where we finish this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I'm still looking for your feedback, so if you have any comments, please let me know, whether it's positive or negative. I don't really mind. I really want to improve this and make it fun and cool for everyone. So if you want to see more of this, subscribe. But until next time, see ya!